You're listening to Higher Self Wellness with Alec Hurley. Welcome to the show. If you're new, hey, what's up? Welcome to the show. If you're returning, welcome back. And I'd appreciate it if you'd like to show some support for this show. You could leave a review. You could share with a friend. You can share with a family member, or you could even reach out to me personally, email me, connect with me on social media. Find me, Alec Hurley, or my email address, alec@higherself.yoga. Let me know what you think of the show. I'd love to hear. Today I have on here Dr. Dawson Church. He's a PhD. He's an award-winning author with his best-selling book, The Genie in Your Genes. And he's just an awesome guy. Super friendly. I had a blast talking to him. We got into a really great flow. And I'm sure you will connect with that during this listen. But we're talking about his latest book today, and this is the book Mind to Matter. And this is the book in which he reviews the science of peak mental states. And he founded the National Institute for Integrative Healthcare to study and implement promising evidence-based psychological as well as medical techniques. His groundbreaking research, it's been published all around in prestigious journals, and he is the editor of Energy Psychology, Theory, Research, and Treatment, a peer-reviewed professional journal. And he's also a blogger for the Huffington Post, and he shares how to apply the breakthroughs of energy psychology to health and athletic performance through the emotional freedom technique, which we don't talk too much about here, but I would love to talk to him further about it. He's done a ton of work in this field, and as you'll get from the conversation, he's just an awesome guy. Boom, boom, boom. A couple of links. These are going to be in the notes, but you can find more about the book at mindtomatter.club. You can head on over to his site and receive a free gift, dawsongift.com, or you can find out more about the emotional freedom technique over at EFTuniverse.com. And let's see here. Boom, boom. If you haven't been over to the website recently, check it out. A couple things have changed around, but you will still find a couple free ebook downloads over there, guided meditations. You can sign up for the newsletter to receive recipes, insights, and such stuff. You can find the blog. You can connect with me. And yeah, that's enough. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you enjoy this. So this is going to be a two-part series. This is part 1, and part 2 I'll be releasing shortly after this. So without further ado, here we go. This is a conversation I just had earlier with Dr. Dawson Church and myself on his newest book, Mind to Matter.
Okay.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, Dr. Dawson Church, welcome to the Higher Self Wellness podcast. And just off the bat, I'm curious about what sparked your curiosity. What sparked your interests in diving deep into these fields?
You'll get a laugh out of this, Alec. What sparked my curiosity was my wife is a fan of the Abraham Hicks work. And they talk a lot about your thoughts create your reality. And so when I would drive with her in her car, she'd have an Abraham Hicks CD on usually. She just plays these all day long in her car. And so when I'd be a passenger in her car, I'd be listening to these Abraham Hicks recordings about how your thoughts create your reality. And my mind, my scientific mind was saying, that's a nice, sweet, metaphysical conceit, but there's no scientific reality to that. And so I began to, then I thought, I've had so many events happen in my life that were miracles, that were synchronous. Maybe there is something to this scientifically, and maybe I should start to look at all the links between thought and thing and see if I can trace every single sequential piece of the puzzle from thought to thing scientifically. So I began to interview other scientists and talk to them at conferences and interview them on radio shows. And I began to discover that there was a lot of scientific evidence for this. I got more and more and more excited about it. And I thought eventually I'd write a book, Mind to Matter, that showed most of the links. I thought, I'll be able to prove maybe half the links or 3/4 of the links. There's no way I'll be able to show absolutely every single link in the chain from thought to thing. And the more science I read, the more astonished I became that I could literally show every single step in the journey from thought to thing. And so that's why I just became amazed and then enthusiastic about teaching this to people, because we don't have to accept our limitations. We don't have to accept a little view of the world. We don't have to accept a limited view of ourselves. We can be and do and accomplish enormous amounts simply with our thoughts and with our consciousness.
Wow. And so that reminds me of just the concept that I first thought of when I started reading it, Mind to Matter, was like, to know and not do is the same to not know. So like you're very adamant about putting these practices into action and really applying them to your life. And so you also mentioned right there, and it reminded me also of the middle ground. So talk to me about what the middle ground is and
Well, the middle ground is important, and science shows us what the middle ground is. And so the stuff you cannot do with your mind, the stuff you cannot do with your consciousness. Like, for example, I'm in my 60s. I will never be in my 20s. No matter how much I try and think about that, I'll never be in my 30s again. I'll never be an NBA player. I'll never be able to fly the Concorde. I'll never be able to time travel back in history. I don't think so anyway. I'd like to be able to do that sometimes. But I do have various interesting things like that and those things are not going to happen. I'm never going to be the first man on the moon, no matter how much I think that thought. So that stuff that's just impossible. And then there's stuff that's really possible. Like, I'm thirsty right now. I've had the thought I'd like some water. Here's water. Well, when I tell you that I manifested a bottle of water to take a drink from, you aren't saying, God, this guy is amazing. He manifested water to drink water for himself. It's like anyone can do that, okay? So that's the stuff anyone can do. Then there's the stuff like flying to the moon without a spaceship that no one can do. What's the middle ground? And what does science tell you you can do? And it turns out, when you look at the science behind it, that science shows you can do a whole huge amount, both inside and outside your body. And I'm going to give you one concrete story that was inspired by the book. I have a friend called Beth Meisner, who has a book coming out soon. And Beth was diagnosed 1.5 years ago with breast cancer. And the surgeons found a large lump in her right breast. And they also found that the cancer had spread to her lymph nodes under her right arm. Now that's a serious diagnosis, because once those cancer cells get into your lymph nodes, then they can travel all throughout your body, producing metastases all over your body, and it's going to get you. They also then found 3 spots of inflammation on her right lung. And the diagnosis was so serious that when the oncologist gave it to her in her office, the oncologist said to Beth, she said, normally we would want you to be in chemotherapy and radiation as soon as possible, like next week. This is so serious. I want you going straight from my office today to the radiology department to get your first radiation treatment. It's that serious. And Beth said, now she was panicked, but she said, I need time to think about this. I don't want to rush into a treatment path. I need time to reflect on my highest good. And she phoned me, emailed me. She was in a panic. She got really good advice from other doctors as well. And she said, I'm going to see what I can do with energy. Now, again, the doctors wanted to do radiation, chemotherapy, cut the tumor out, all these things to do with matter, working on the level of matter, okay? But she said, I'm going to take this approach of focusing on what energy can do, what healing effects energy can have. So she did everything possible over the next few weeks that she could energetically. She had energy medicine workers work on her. She did Qigong. She had me do some EFT, emotional freedom techniques, tapping with her. She cleaned up her energy environment. She quit listening to the news, turned off all her alerts, resigned from the volunteer organization she was volunteering for. She completely cleaned up all of the stress in her life and focused on injecting herself with positive energy. She got the diagnosis in March. By May, 2 months later, thermography scans showed that her lymph nodes were completely clear, and the tumor had shrunk from 5 centimeters, which is big, to 1.4 centimeters in size, shrunk by more than half. And later on, she got blood tests. They showed there was no trace of cancer in her body. Now, that's the effect that mind and consciousness can have on matter when it comes to our bodies. And so there are so many stories like that. The middle ground of how we can heal ourselves turns out to be enormous. There's so much more we can do. I'll tell you one more just little fun story about the middle ground. Okay, so I went to an Tony Robbins seminar in New York City in 1983, a long time ago, and I've kind of followed his career over the last 30 years. I've thought a few times over the last year or two, you know, I'd love to meet Tony Robbins. I'd love to just meet him face to face and have a chance to interact with him. And so for like maybe a year and a half or so, I've had that thought. I'd love to meet Tony Robbins face to face. A few months ago, I got an email in my inbox and it said, would you be willing to speak at a Tony Robbins event? I emailed them back and said, well, only if I can meet Tony Robbins. And they said, of course, you'll be there as his guest. You'll be on the stage with Tony. And so I said, yes, I'm going to chat. They flew me out to Abu Dhabi where he was speaking and flew me business class, and I got a great trip out of it and met Tony. But again, it was a thought. It was just a thought I had. I took no action on it whatsoever. I find more and more, even scientifically, that just having the thought, having the intention, just creates the thing. So the universe is like that. When we make ourselves available to the universe, it makes all kinds of miracles available to us. So the middle ground of what we can do by consciousness alone turns out to be enormous, whether it's healing our bodies or meeting our heroes.
Wow. That's a fun story. And, it's funny because I feel like a lot of time it's easy for us to disregard a lot of these things that actually happen to us, but later on we can link them together and be like, you know what?
Right.
I was thinking about that a couple of years ago a lot. And sure enough, now it's part of my everyday life.
Yes.
And that's actually happened to the house that I live in now. I'm like very fortunate. And my girlfriend and I, we were for a long time like, maybe we can just like live in somebody's garage, but now we have a beautiful apartment on top of somebody's garage. And it might not look exactly as your thoughts have created inside your mind, but like they're definitely still interlinked. And
they definitely are.
Yeah.
And you tell that in retrospect. You look back and say, oh yeah, I was thinking that a while back, and here it is in my life. But what I'm urging people to do in my book, Mind to Matter, is to become a deliberate participant in that process. Not just sort of have these thoughts go through randomly and then have things show up randomly, but really use focused intention to produce the results you want in your life.
Mm-hmm. So it's in a sense, it's taking control of your consciousness and allowing your consciousness to then build your external reality to suit like your inner world and to really suit your needs. And it's like this process of like actively evolving our own identity and then actively evolving our own outer landscape to then meet our inner identity in a sense.
Yes. You do that, and you're right about being deliberate about it, because the way the brain works is we have various nodes, various parts of the brain that link together. And so when your attention is focused on something, when you really focus on a task. Like right now, we're focused on this conversation. We're focused on everyone who is sharing in the conversation with us. When you're focused on something, when you're doing a spreadsheet, when you're writing an essay, a blog post, when you're talking to a person, then various brain regions are active. But when you are just resting, there was a huge study done by 2 Harvard psychologists, and they developed an app, and at random times it just asked people what they were doing. The app would just pop up and say, what are you doing right now? And what's your emotional and mental state? And they found that when people were on task, when they were doing something productive, they were generally pretty happy. But when they were resting and when they were not active, a part of the brain called the default mode network kicks in. And there's one big complex up here in front of our brains called the medial prefrontal cortex, another one in the back of our brains called the posterior cingulate cortex, and these are the main drivers of the default mode network. And it's called the default mode network because it turns on when you aren't doing a task. And the thing about the default mode network is there are 2 main kinds of thinking it does. And one of those is looking back on the past and reviewing anything that was negative as an experience. So any bad thing that happened to you, the default mode network reverts back to thinking about that. And the other thing it's really good at is the default mode network thinks about bad stuff that might happen in the future. So what these psychologists found is when people were at work, when they were focused on a task, having a conversation, when they were writing an essay, all of those times, they were generally pretty happy. But when they were resting, when they were doing nothing, their default mode network kicked in and they were really unhappy. So that's unfortunately what our consciousness defaults to. That's why it's called the default mode network. Our brain just defaults to thinking about the bad stuff, and it takes a lot of focus, a lot of retraining to train yourself to think consciously about the good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's when the practice of meditation and really learning how to entrain your brain to rework that network so it's a more upgraded version. Is that
yes?
Is that in alignment?
Yes, you want to definitely retrain your brain, and you can. In chapter 1 of Mind to Matter, I have this just amazing case history, because in the book there's a ton of science, but I always illustrate the science by the stories of people, like my friend Beth who had that experience with cancer. So this guy, I talk about him in chapter 1. His name is Graham Phillips, and he's an astrophysicist, but he works as a TV reporter. And he had been reading about the benefits of meditation and didn't really believe in it, but he thought, I've read their health benefits, I'll give it a try. So he signed up for an 8-week mindfulness program, and because he's a TV guy, he went in the studio. They took him to a big lab at a university called Monash University, and they did a whole series of tests on him, including a full MRI workup of his brain. And then he began to meditate after that, and then after 8 weeks went back into the lab at Monash, did a second whole workup of him, second MRI, and the researchers found that in 8 weeks, the part of his brain responsible for emotional regulation. And emotional regulation means that when somebody cuts you off on the freeway, you don't scream and swear at them or give them the finger. That means that when you don't get the results you want right away, that means when the person you ask for a date says no, you don't feel depressed for a week. All of these ways of regulating our emotions are really important. When you watch the TV, you don't get all upset and depressed by the news. So emotional regulation is key to happiness. And they found there's a circuit in the brain called the dentate gyrus, and that is responsible for coordinating the brain, many different regions of the brain, to produce emotional regulation. They found that after 8 weeks, the volume of neural tissue in Graham Phillips's dentate gyrus grew by 22.8%. In 8 weeks, the volume of tissue, the volume of neurons grew by 22.8%. So our brains are literally being remodeled by our consciousness all the time. And we are, as we apply these methods like mindfulness, meditation, I have about 30 different things in the book. EFT tapping, I recommend grounding yourself, walking barefoot on the earth, and I talk about the science of being being in nature, how being in nature affects us. So there are 30 practices in the book, but I want to inspire people to do those practices. And it's literally producing remodeling in your neural networks. You are a much happier person, not just in abstract, not in consciousness, but literally in terms of brain circuitry. So absolutely, you are changing the hardware of your brain with the software of your mind.
Wow. Yeah, it's easy for us to forget because we're so intelligent that we are nature, we are animals. And I like to come back to this daily because we have all these things taking our attention outwardly, right? We have technology, we have our phones, computers, all this stuff that's driving our attention outwardly. But rarely, we don't spend a lot of time really exploring our inner landscape. We're very much right now exploring the landscape of technology and hyper-connectedness. You're in Northern California, I'm in Southern California, and we're having a conversation right here face to face. Yet, if we turn our senses inward, then we can then have a personal experience with our own inner landscape and then begin to reshape and rework that landscape. And I really like in chapter 1 how you really go into how the mind creates the brain and how this is the gateway to begin taking control of your emotional regulation. And I really feel like if our attention is so dispersed outwardly, then we are absorbing so much of other people's stuff and we're being influenced in so many different ways. And we're just losing control of our emotions because we're picking up a little bit of this person's energy or a little bit of this person's thought.
Right.
And I know you go into that of being weary of being a consumer of information. You talk about the risk of being a consumer of information. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, and I have examples there of people who are really unhappy and nothing's bad in their lives. They're just absorbing this information from the outside and they are then getting all upset and depressed about what's on the news. And what struck me, I've had the real privilege of meeting so many best-selling authors. I worked with Bruce Lipton on his book, Biology of Belief. I know John Gray. I know Marcy Shimoff, and I met Marianne Williamson. And I've just been so lucky to meet these people. And they kind of know what's going on in the world. They may listen to the news occasionally, but they are focused on what they can give and offering the wisdom and the inspiration and the blessings of their knowledge out there into the world. They're not absorbing information. And in chapter 1, I talk about Delilah, a friend of mine, and the information field. And she would wake up in the morning, turn on NPR, listen to the news, have NPR playing in her car when she drove, and be really so stressed out about the fate of the world and all the stuff going on. And you're then allowing all of that negativity to shape your consciousness. And really, there's nothing bad happening to you. There is no tiger chasing you down the street. There are no den of rattlesnakes in your office. There's nothing bad actually nothing really life-threatening going on, and yet your level of cortisol, because I've done several studies of the stress hormone cortisol, I talk about that in the book, and people's cortisol levels are high. We test them with lab tests, and we find that they're living basically in paradise. They're living in Hawaii, they're living in California, they're living in a beautiful place. All their needs are met. They aren't starving, they aren't hungry. There are no hostile. 19,000 years ago, when the ice was melting in Europe and Neanderthals were competing with Cro-Magnons and Denisonians and Homo sapiens, life was, you had to look out around you all the time or you didn't make it. Now, rough. None of that, and yet we still have high cortisol. We're still acting as though we live in a hostile environment, and we're aging ourselves prematurely. We're damaging our bodies and ourselves with those stress hormones. So absolutely, we need to take control of our consciousness. Do what Beth Meisner did. Even if you aren't sick, turn off the news. You can get away just fine listening to maybe a weekly news digest, but to be tuned in to every little twitch of the stock market or every single little bit of news from the trade war, don't do it to yourself. Don't make that the driver of your consciousness. Tune into the universe. Meditate in the morning. And when you wake up in the morning, I talk a lot about brainwaves in the book, about the slow waves of theta and delta. And again, the list of the benefits you get from doing that: increased cell communication, increased cell regeneration, increased stem cell production, increased telomere length, which is what drives your longevity, reduced stress hormones. I mean, massive effects from doing this. And so that's really what I'm urging people to do in the book is not let all those external information fields drive your internal experience. You have a choice to hook up to the same force that makes the planets spin, that makes the birds migrate, that makes the tides go up and down. And when you're hooked up to that, I can tell you, there is not a lot of bad news coming from nature. It's just full of love for you. I have a meditation, free meditation that goes with the book, just tuning into a benevolent universe. And you wake up and say each morning, benevolent universe, what amazing synchronicities will you produce for me in my life today? I can't wait to find out. And you're like a little kid. I mean, you're so excited about the whole world. You just can't wait to see what will happen for you that day. So it's a very different life from the one you have if you're letting other people determine your consciousness by consuming all of those negative information sources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And like nature is inherently supportive. Nature is nurturing. It has our back. And so I'm really big into studying the ancient traditions of Ayurveda and really syncing ourselves up to these planetary cycles and these cosmic cycles and knowing that everything is a pulsation, everything is in rhythm. And if we really attune ourselves to the daily rhythms, if we attune ourselves to the seasonal rhythms, then we open up the gateway to then experience these deeper states of vitality and like well-being and like physically, mentally, emotionally, and then also spiritually. We have this capacity then to really expand our consciousness and to sense the interconnectedness and the subtleties of life, of just like the wind blowing through the trees. But if we are heightened and if our nervous system is not responding in accordance with what actually life is like going on around us, and if we're always in this state of stress, then we are closing the door and we're not able then to really experience the finesse of life and the love that's always around us and the love that's always within us. And so in chapter 2, you talk about how energy builds matter, and you go into talk about EFT, you talk about sound and cymatics, and all those things are beautiful, especially sound. Because I really believe like music, everything is information, right? Food, communication, the sounds of what we're saying, also the sounds of what we're listening to through the music and the sound of nature. All this stuff is communication from outside, and then our body interprets it and tells us like how to then react. So could you talk a little bit more about like how sound does really affect our thoughts or maybe the brainwaves that we are having?
Yes. That field of science is called cymatics. I talk about a lot of different fields here, fields of science, like, for example, the field of emergence, which is the natural phenomena, and self-organizing systems. And emergence has to do with, for example, I have one video. I have links in the book to videos. One of these is a flock of birds all flying together in sync. And so these flocks, sometimes of millions of birds, are able to fly in sync because of this phenomenon called emergence. I talk a lot about that. And then how energy in the form of various waves can shape those kinds of natural processes. And I find cymatics really interesting. And essentially, when you pass sound waves through a material substance, in cymatics video that I also have as part of the book, we show how if you take a metal plate and organize pollen particles or sand particles or salt particles on the plate and then pass different frequencies through it, just the sound is shaping the matter. And I then talk about the frequency, for example, of love, and the frequency of confusion, the frequency of resentment, how there's such different frequencies and they're sending different signals to our bodies. And these signals are absolutely literal signals. I show in the book what different brainwave states look like. And we have 8 essential waves in our brains, but the ratio at which our brains are expressing those 8 brainwaves is very different. So, for example, when we are in a state of fear or anxiety or distress, then we have a lot of this high frequency wave called beta, and very little of these low frequency waves, theta and delta. And so if you show me a person's EEG, I can tell you without knowing their gender, I don't need to know their age, I can tell you what their mental state is just looking at their EEG and what their brain is doing. So these invisible fields of sound, of energy that our bodies are creating are affecting us and affecting our cells all the time. And the interesting thing is our cells are actually not that responsive to massive frequencies. So these really loud noises and things like, massive power surges, our cells can't hear that. It's too loud for them. They're responsive to these incredibly tiny frequencies. They're too small to carry energy, but they do carry information. And so sound and frequency is affecting our cells dramatically. One example I give in the book is this study on telomerase. And our telomeres are the end caps to our chromosomes. And people who have long telomere end caps live longer than those that have shorter ones. So, for example, risky behaviors like smoking, obesity, and so on, it shortens your telomeres, and those people die a lot sooner than those who don't engage in those behaviors. And so telomeres are the single most reliable measure of aging. And in one amazing study, the researchers looked at various frequencies and what they were doing to telomere regeneration in our cells. And they found that there were what they called frequency windows, very specific windows of frequency that sparked our body's generation of telomeres. And in this particular study, they found that there's one frequency window at 0.19 cycles per second, so very, very slow wave, but that produced that single frequency window produced a 10-fold increase in regeneration of telomeres. So your cells are listening to these tiny, subtle signals from your body, and I explain how meditation works, what frequencies we generate in meditation, and then the effects those have on our cells. And it turns out that there are literally hundreds of beneficial effects going on in our bodies when we use these. So sound, frequency, vibration is having an enormous effect on our cells and on our health.
How about with like brainwave entrainment music, to where the music is specifically designed to create specific brainwave patterns? Have you done any research in that or looked into that at all?
I have, and I have a colleague called Judith Pennington who has tested quite a number of them, and she finds that some of them do actually have positive effects on the brain, but many of them that are advertised to don't. So people have done EEG, and we then have played various kinds of these programs, and some of them make claims for efficacy. When we test them with EEG, they're showing little or no effect. Some actually are even showing a negative effect. So there's a lot of hype out there about these and not a lot of science. And you need to really look at the science. I mean, throughout Mind to Matter, over and over again, I say, what does science tell you? This is stuff that works, this is stuff that doesn't work, and this is stuff where we just don't know if it works or doesn't work because there's no science behind it. So I really focus in the book on things that science tells us does work, and those frequency recordings, some of them work, some of them don't. We've tested a few of them, and it was kind of a mixed bag. The stuff that I do give you, though, in the book, we do know does work, and there's research to prove it.
That's cool. And I could see those sound waves, working for some people and not working for other people. And I mean, meditation can put you into the same state. So it's like, this works. We know it works. So why not just do that?
It's so simple. It's ancient. People have been meditating, teaching meditation for thousands of years. And this is a long tradition. Only now are we putting people in MRIs and EEGs and studying their brainwaves. But meditation does so many amazing things for your body. And after I began to write those chapters, I couldn't talk about all the effects of frequencies on our cells. So I narrowed it down to which brain waves you have in meditation and the effect of those waves on your cells. And it turned out to be enormous, that there were so many good effects that meditation had. So it's ancient technology, but it really can have a big effect on your body. So subjectively, you feel calmer. And that subjective feeling of calm means that all kinds of positive things are going on in your body. Your cell communication improves. Your ratios of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, those all balance out. Your cortisol drops down. When cortisol drops, positive hormones, cell-building hormones like DHEA and oxytocin rise. In one study of EFT that I did recently, I actually had people at a week-long retreat, and we were doing meditation with them in the morning and then EFT tapping with them all day long. And after 1 week, the average decline in baseline cortisol was 37%, okay? So they're having a huge drop in their baseline cortisol. That's not taking 10,000 hours. It's not taking 10 years of practice. It's just 7 days of meditation and EFT. When the bad stuff goes down in your body, as a general rule, the good stuff goes up. So the cortisol dropped 37%. We also measured a substance called immunoglobulin, which is a key marker of your body's ability to defend itself against pathogens and toxins coming in from the outside world. So cortisol dropped 37%. Immunoglobulins rose 113%. Okay, massive rise in immunity when you deal with stress. So it's not taking a long time. It's super easy. It's been around for thousands of years. It seriously works wonders in your body.
And it's as simple as just taking a seat or even standing, but just closing your eyes, directing your attention inward. And what I really like about meditation is that there's so many different styles and different practices that one can do. And have you noticed a difference in between like different styles of meditations and how they affect one's own mind and ability to take control or regain control of their emotional regulation?
Yeah, and there are many different kinds of meditation, and some actually are more effective than others. And the bad news actually is that some forms of meditation don't do much at all. So we'll hook people up to EEGs, they'll close their eyes, they'll start meditating, and they'll actually lose their coherence level will drop. Your heart coherence level is a good measure for your overall health. Also, heart coherence drives brain coherence. And people who are really good manifestors tend to have a high level of coherence. And people who meditate often drop out of coherence when they start to meditate. And so we hook people up and find that some kinds of meditation are far more effective than others. So in the book, I train people on a very simple technique called eco meditation. And research is now showing that this just gets you there super fast. It's also not spiritually based. It's agnostic. It just says, breathe a certain way, relax these muscles, adopt these postures, and we know that automatically people will tend to go into a really deep state if they do that. So all meditation is not created equal. Find a meditation that works well for you, but try eco meditation because it's free, it's on the web, it's super simple, it's in the book, and research is showing that it automatically puts people into this very, very deep state, not through trying to talk you through a series of ideas, but just by adopting some physical postures that put you there. And again, you'll feel the shift in your body when you do that.
And how do you spell that type of meditation?
Eco, E-C-O.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Eco. Wow. Thank you for tuning in to the show today. That wraps up our round one of this conversation/interview I had with Dr. Dawson Church. If you have enjoyed this episode, then share it with a friend who might find some value in it. Leave a review on iTunes or head on over to the website. Either way, thanks for tuning in, and be sure to look out for the next part of this episode. Take care. Have a beautiful day.